Hello, and welcome to FCA News. Today, we're going to be reflecting on a wonderful decade, 1970. Today is December 29th, 1979. So to start this all off, we're going to talk about the great president, Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon was the 37th president of the United States. Nixon had managed to achieve many great things, but in the end, it was all overshadowed by the Watergate scandal. Nixon had served for 2 years as Dwight Eisenhower's vice president. He then ran but lost against Democrat John F. Kennedy. In 1968, he managed to rerun and win against Herbert Humphrey. Nixon's main achievement were forging close ties with China and the Soviet Union. In 1972, President Nixon decided to make a historic visit to both China and the Soviet Union. This in fact decreased tensions between the communist sides and the United States. Furthermore, Nixon signed very important treaties to limit the creation and use of nuclear weapons. Another one of Nixon's great achievements was the withdrawal of troops from the controversial Vietnam War. He tactically withdrew troops over time, while at the same time training South Vietnamese troops in order for them to stay alive for the remaining of the war. This strategy was called Vietnamization. Unfortunately for Nixon, his decision regarding Watergate overlooked his entire presidency. So next we're going to be talking about Watergate scandal itself. Nixon's Watergate scandal completely changed America's course of history. It created distrust and further separated the people from the government. It all started on June 27th, 1972. When 5 men were arrested for breaking into a Democratic National Committee's main headquarters. It was later found that this wasn't just a normal break-in. In fact, they were trying to plant wiretaps on the phone and take pictures of important documents using the camera. 4 out of the 5 men captured were identified as anti-Castro Cubans. These were the 3 men that were responsible for the Watergate scandal. The 5th man was later identified as James McCord, the security advisor for Nixon's campaign. Snitch! To re-elect the president, or CPR. Nixon went to win 49 to 50 states in November 1972 against George McGovern. Early 1973, James McCord admitted that Nixon's administration ordered the Watergate break-in. Many officials resigned because of McCord's words, and it caused a massive downward spiral from there. Finally, in U.S. versus Nixon, the Supreme Court forced Nixon to give up the tapes, resulting in the decision. Nixon resigned from office, and General Ford was one that became president. Ford later went to give Nixon a full pardon for his service in the United States. Even though Nixon had many great accomplishments, the Watergate scandal overshadows his legacy. Okay, now to the next topic, entertainment of the 70s. The 70s was filled with great music, specifically in the world of rock. Pink Floyd released Wish You Were Here in 1975, a short yet profound album with deep and hidden messages. Queen and Aerosmith made their debuts in the 70s. The Beatles released the great song Hey Jude in 1970. Sesame Street started up in 1969 but was very famous in the 1970s. The show was just a classic, every child's favorite, and captured the heart of many adults. It was a favorite from the start. Sesame Street was the world of puppets. It was funny and happy and just plain old goofy sometimes. You can never decide which character is your favorite, and they have been a success from the beginning and are still good today. Brady Bunch was one of the most popular shows of absolutely all time. It was a show about the funniest average funny of all time. The theme song really explains it all. This is the original show about 2 families colliding, which has been redone in many ways such as Yours, Mine, and Ours, and a couple of others. But this was the show that started it all, and no one will ever forget it. Great toys are originated in the 70s. Barbie, Superman, Etch-a-Sketch, and lava lamps were all super hot in the 70s. All these items helped mark the 70s as a great decade of entertainment. Now, with that being said, we're going to talk about environmentalism during the 70s. In the 70s, the term environmentalism arose addressing the importance of combating common everyday problems and major issues alike that face the environment. The first Earth Day occurred on April 22nd, 1970. Save the planet! Brainchild of the U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson. It was created to inspire awareness and appreciation for the Earth's environment. The success and publicity of Earth Day officially kicked off the 70s and environment decade. The overwhelming awareness that swept the nation hit the U.S. government right in the face and prompted them to pass many bills designed to help the environment. Some of these bills included the NEPA, the Clean Air Act of 1970, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, the Environmental Pesticide Control Act, Endangered Species Act, the Toxic Substance Control Act, just to name a few. According to the ISSA survey, there was a 72% cutback in plastic, 54% cutback in paper, 60 million pound cotton shortage, and wood and rayon were simply unattainable. These scarce materials caused ridiculous product lead times. It took 30 weeks to get a motor, 50 weeks for a switch. Also, gas shortages made it difficult to make deliveries, and salespeople used the phone more and traveled less to connect with customers. The 70s will also be known as a decade to truly start caring about the planet and truly start making an environment change in the way we live our lives. At a news conference, President Richard Nixon says that the Vietnam War is coming to a conclusion as a result of the plan that we have instituted. Nixon had announced at a conference in Midway in June that the United States would be following a new program he termed Vietnamization. Under the provisions of the program, South Vietnamese forces would be built up so they could assume more responsibility for the war. As the South Vietnamese forces became more capable, U.S. forces would be withdrawn from combat and returned to the United States. In his speech, Nixon pointed out that he had already ordered the withdrawal of 60,000 U.S. troops. Concurrently, he had issued orders to provide the South Vietnamese with more modern equipment and weapons and increased the advisory effort, all as part of the Vietnamization program. As Nixon was holding his press conference, troops from the U.S. 25th Infantry Division began departing from Vietnam. Nixon's pronouncements that the war ending was proved premature. In April 1970, he expanded the war by ordering U.S. and South Vietnamese troops to attack communist sanctuaries in Cambodia. The resulting outcry across the U.S. led to a number of anti-war demonstrations. It was at one of these demonstrations that the National Guard shot 4 protesters at Kent State. Although Nixon continued to decrease American troop strength in South Vietnam, the fighting continued. In 1972, the North Vietnamese launched a massive invasion of South Vietnam. The South Vietnamese forces reeled under the attack, but eventually prevailed with the help of U.S. air power. After extensive negotiations and the bombing of North Vietnam in December 1972, the Paris Peace Accords were signed in January 1973. Under the provisions of the accord, U.S. forces were completely withdrawn. Unfortunately, this did not end the war for the Vietnamese, and the fighting continued until April 1975, when Saigon fell to the Communists.